one, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tlaib.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. You know, no one reports to Ms. Conway probably, and she doesn't run any federal programs because she's campaigning on taxpayer dollars. Are you aware she gets paid $179,700?
I think that's the maximum.
Yeah. Mr. Kerner, under the Hatch Act, a federal employee may not engage in political activity while on duty or, and I quote, in any room or building occupied in the discharge of official duties by an individual employed or holding office in the government of the United States. Does that basically mean the grounds of any federal building, government building?
Yes, but that's also the provision that doesn't apply to her.
Okay,
So
does that
what we're
include,
talking about.
so does it include grounds of the White House? Does it apply to her? Is it why is it important that federal employees do not engage in political activity while they are on grounds of a federal building?
Yeah, that's exactly the issue we talked about earlier. If we're going to have a depoliticized workforce,
Yes.
we can't have people running around campaigning all day long while they're supposed
On
to be
taxpayer
doing
dollars.
Correct.
Yep. OSC found that on multiple occasions, Kellyanne Conway engaged in political activity during press interviews on White House grounds. Is that correct?
Yes, using her official authority, yes.
And I hate wanting to go through this clip, but we got to go. So there's a clip, interview on April 24, 2019 that I like to show my colleagues.
Bernie Sanders has a lot in common with Donald Trump, which is he doesn't really care what his party thinks about his candidacy at this point in the primaries. He's connecting directly with the voters. He's raising small dollar amounts. The only difference between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump is Bernie Sanders' ideas are terrible for America, and Donald Trump was a much better candidate, had connective tissue with the people. And so I think Biden will be seen as the alternative to Bernie Sanders, but he's got a lot of people in his way. And look, old, white, male career politicians like Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden is not exactly what the Democratic Party had in mind for 2020. Bernie Sanders.
Mr. Kerner, based on that video, do you agree that Ms. Conway appears to be on White House grounds when she's making that statement?
It does appear that way, yes.
Is she campaigning?
It seems, I believe this was one of the violations we found in our report.
Yep. OSC noted that in a report released June 13th that Conway, quote, appeared in front of the White House. Mr. Kerner, the news clip also identified Ms. Conway as, quote, a counselor to President Trump, correct?
Yes, counselor to the president, correct.
When you see the text in the news clip with the title counselor to the President of the United States, is that factor that supports that Ms. Conway is speaking in her official capacity?
Yes, it does.
OSC found that this interview violated the Hatch Act, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Can you explain what it was about Ms. Conway's comments during this interview that violated the Hatch Act?
Yes, so the description was about existing Democratic presidential candidates. It wasn't talking about a policy. It wasn't talking about anything other than them personally. And she was on White House grounds. OSC has found that she was in her using her official authority to talk about election-related incidents, which she's not supposed to be doing.
And it's obvious that Ms. Conway was willfully and openly disregarding the law on federal premises in public view. Do you believe that Ms. Conway has any intention of ever complying with the rule of law or following the directions regarding the Hatch Act?
I'm an optimist, so I remain optimistic that she will.
You know, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, if there's a lot of disagreements about how the Hatch Act is implemented here, how it's applied to Ms. Conway, then the members of this body can change it. They can propose laws to change it. He is applying the law as it exists to a person on taxpayer dollars campaigning for the President of the United States. And, Mr. Chairman, I would urge the President to allow Ms. Conway to either resign or fire her and then hire her on the campaign side, where she obviously belongs, not working on behalf of the American people. I yield the rest of my time.
Ms. Tlaib, would you yield for?
No, Mr. Meadows. I yield the rest of my time to the Chairman. And
it was a nice comment.
I know, I understand. And, you know, I have to say something, Mr. Meadows. You know, I am new here, and one of the things that is very obvious to me, and I'm also an attorney, and I can tell you, if I ever want to hire a defense team, I know exactly where to go, especially if I've, you know, allegedly committed a crime. It is so absurd, and the chairman was correct. You know, sometimes I don't ask any of my clients whether they're Democrat or Republican. I ask, you know, what were the actions, whether or not to play, and sometimes I urge them to comply when they're in violation of the law, and I work it out. But in this instance, we're allowing the American people to see it's okay to normalize the fact that a person that's being paid close to $200,000 of our money to campaign on our dime, on our money and our time, where she's supposed to go advise on policy. You know, in this chamber right here, in this body, I'm not allowed to specifically say something about a colleague in this chamber. I can say certain acts or certain things. I can talk about certain policies. And the chairman has been so patient with me in teaching me that process. And I abide by those rules. But it's so absurd that we sit here and watch over and over again somebody that we're paying on government dime to go on national TV to campaign and talk about other candidates. It's just wrong.
Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Mr. Kerner. I'm wondering on the, so